when the climate change crusade got going a couple of decades ago, I did a bit of reading around the subject, a bit of basic research, and discovered that the greatest contributor to the greenhouse effect was actually the evaporation of water from the seas. So water evaporation and clouds constitute about 90% of the greenhouse effect. Now, of course, this has nothing whatsoever to do with the Industrial Revolution and the contribution of man-made carbon to the atmosphere. The response to this by warmists was something along the lines that, oh yes, but it's just the little bit of carbon emissions generated by humans that makes all the difference. The straw that breaks the camel's back, it's just the carbon emissions. So I concluded from that what climate change campaigners are saying is that whilst water vapour, which is just a purely naturalistic process, constitutes most of the greenhouse gases, the small amount of carbon that is produced by human activity that's where the real battleground lies. And that told me that it doesn't matter, although whilst I think climate change is a load of garbage and I don't agree with it and all the rest of it, but what that tells me is that climate change, the effect of climate change, so-called, is what I call incremental. And that is to say, for practical purposes, that contrary to what goes on today, if there's a hurricane or a heat wave, warmists immediately assert that this is climate change in action. And my immediate response is that, wait a minute, this is incremental. If human carbon emissions are the thing that is driving climate change, it is only driving it in an increasingly incremental fashion. So, if we have a massive hurricane, it has not been caused by climate change, but about 1% of it you could put down to climate change, or half of 1%. And the next one, 5 years later, will rise from half of 1% to 1%. And the next one, 10 years later, will rise from 1% to 1.5%. And so consequently, it is nonsense to say that a massive hurricane or a massive heat wave has been caused by climate change, that only a very tiny part of it has been. That will increase in intensity as time goes on and as the decades roll by until the end of this century. The sea levels will rise and we'll all be dead. But this doesn't stop politicians from claiming that the latest heat wave, I grew up in Australia in the 1950s and 60s, and the heat waves were atrocious. I hated the heat waves. And Australia is a land of sunburnt plains and all the rest of it. Flood and drought and flooding rains. And the obvious incremental nature of climate change, if it exists, which I seriously doubt, but if it exists, it is only incremental. And whenever you strike a climate change crusader, you should remind them of this. This is what conservatives should be doing, reminding people of the nonsense of claiming that perfectly normal climatic occurrences are the result of man-made effects. And nothing so clearly demonstrates the crass politicking of these climate change ideologues that a politician stands up there and has the temerity to declare that some freakish climatic condition is the result of climate change as an act of pure political opportunism. And conservatives should be calling these people out for what they are.